It's strange how life can bring someone unexpected right to your doorstep. I never thought I'd be standing at the edge of something so reckless, but that's exactly where I found myself one cool autumn night. My name is Ryan, and I've always prided myself on being the loyal type, the dependable friend, the supportive partner. I'd recently gone through a breakup that left me feeling unmoored, but things were finally stabilizing. And I'd certainly never imagined it would be Emily, my best friend Josh's younger sister, who would make me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Josh and I have been best friends since college, almost a decade now. He's like a brother to me, and I'd watched his little sister Emily grow up from the quiet, awkward teenager she once was into a confident, striking woman. I knew her well, or at least I thought I did. But one late-night visit changed everything. It was around midnight on a Friday, and I just settled down in front of the TV with a beer, ready to unwind after a long week. The sound of a knock at the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I pulled on a hoodie and went to check who it was. When I opened the door, there stood Emily, looking a little disheveled, her cheeks flushed from the chill outside. "Emily?" I asked, surprised. "Is everything okay?" She gave a half smile, tugging her coat around herself. I needed someone to talk to, and I didn't want to wake Josh. I figured you might still be up." It was true that Josh had a busy schedule and was often up before dawn for work. I glanced at her, concerned, and stepped aside to let her in. "Of course, come on in. You look like you could use a drink." She laughed, a small, shaky sound that told me something was wrong. We moved to the living room, and I poured her a glass of wine. She sat down on the couch, pulling her knees up and wrapping her arms around them. She seemed lost in thought, her gaze distant. "Want to tell me what's on your mind?" I asked gently, sitting down next to her. She took a sip of her wine, letting out a sigh. "It's everything, Ryan. Work, my friends, my life. I feel like I'm just drifting, like nothing really matters." We spent hours talking. Emily opened up in a way I'd never seen before, letting her walls down as she spoke about her fears, her dreams, and everything in between. I could see a vulnerability in her that made me feel protective, a side of her that she rarely showed. And as the hours wore on, I found myself feeling more drawn to her than I'd anticipated. As the night wore on, we sat there, closer than before. Emily's laughter filled the room as she recounted a story from college, her eyes sparkling in a way that was hard to ignore. I felt a warmth spreading between us, something I couldn't quite place but felt impossible to deny. It was in the way she looked at me, her gaze lingering a beat too long, her hand brushing mine as she reached for her glass. "So are you seeing anyone?" she asked, her tone casual, though there was an edge to it. Her eyes flicked to mine, then quickly back down. I hesitated, caught off guard. "Not really. I've been pretty focused on work and, well, things haven't exactly lined up for me in that department lately." She nodded, a soft smile forming on her lips. "I get that. Relationships are complicated, maybe too complicated." There was a long pause. I could feel her eyes on me, and when I looked back, I saw something unexpected, a flicker of longing, something far more complex than friendship. I knew this was dangerous territory, but in that moment, reason didn't stand a chance against the pull I felt. "Sometimes," she started, her voice barely above a whisper, "sometimes I think about how different things would be if life had gone in another direction, if I'd made different choices." Her words hung in the air, and suddenly the space between us felt like it was closing. I could feel my heart pounding as she leaned in just a bit closer, her face inches from mine. Her hand lingered on my arm, her touch light yet electric. "Emily," I said, my voice low, though I couldn't bring myself to move away. "We shouldn't—" "I know," she murmured, her eyes fixed on mine, "but I don't want to be alone tonight." It was all the encouragement I needed. In that moment, every line blurred, every reason to stop dissolved, and before I knew it, our lips met, a soft, tentative kiss that quickly deepened. Her hands slid up to my shoulders as mine found her waist, pulling her close. It was as if everything else faded away, and all that existed was this connection, this undeniable pull between us. She broke the kiss first, her breathing unsteady. "I don't want to make things complicated for you," she whispered, though her hands didn't leave my shoulders. "Complicated?" I chuckled softly, unable to stop myself from brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Emily, I think things got complicated the moment you showed up at my door tonight." Her lips quirked into a smile, and before I could say anything else, she leaned back in, her lips meeting mine in another searing kiss. The night seemed to slip away as we surrendered to the moment, letting the weight of our unspoken desires take over. As dawn approached, the weight of reality settled in. Emily sat up, her hair slightly tousled, looking at me with a mixture of regret and something else I couldn't quite define. This might have been a mistake," she said softly, though there was a trace of a smile on her lips. "Maybe," I admitted, though I knew I'd do it all over again. "But some mistakes are worth making." She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "Your trouble, Ryan." "You're one to talk," I replied with a grin. As she got ready to leave, she paused at the door, looking back at me with a hint of mischief in her eyes. "I might regret this later, but for now, let's keep this between us." I nodded, though I knew keeping this secret would be harder than either of us realized. Watching her walk away, I couldn't help but wonder where this would lead, or if we'd ever be able to go back to how things were before that late-night visit. Days went by after that night, and Emily and I managed to carry on as if nothing had happened. We saw each other at the usual gatherings, exchanged pleasantries, even laughed at the same jokes. But the unspoken reality of that evening hung between us like a silent bond, a hidden current beneath our words. Each glance felt a touch too long, each casual touch too loaded. Then one Saturday morning, Emily texted, "Hey, could you meet me for coffee? There's something we should talk about." I felt a flash of nervous anticipation. I agreed, and we decided to meet at a little cafe near her place, a spot I hadn't visited in years. When I walked in, she was already there, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. She looked up as I approached, a hint of relief in her eyes as she gestured for me to sit down. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice a little unsteady. I wasn't sure if you would." "Of course I'd come," I replied, though I couldn't shake the feeling of anxiety settling in my stomach. "So, what's on your mind?" She took a deep breath, setting her spoon down and folding her hands on the table. "Ryan, I've been thinking about that night, about us and what happened. It's not something I take lightly, and I don't want things to get messy." I nodded, knowing exactly what she meant, but struggling to find the right words. "Neither do I, Emily. I don't want to complicate your life or mine, but it's been hard to forget." She looked away, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You're not the only one." She paused, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as she gathered her thoughts. "But we have to be careful, Havind. I don't want to hurt anyone, especially not Nick." The mention of Nick brought a wave of guilt crashing over me. Nick was a good guy, someone I'd known for years, and he'd never suspect that anything was amiss. I couldn't imagine what he'd think if he knew. "Agreed," I said, my voice a little hoarse. "So, what do we do? Go back to how things were?" Emily hesitated, then looked me squarely in the eyes. "Maybe we can't go back," she said quietly, "but maybe we can find a way forward. That's something that won't hurt anyone. I don't know how, but I don't want to just pretend that none of this happened." The vulnerability in her eyes, the sincerity of her words, hit me harder than I expected. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine, a small gesture of solidarity. "We'll figure it out, Em, whatever it takes." She gave my hand a gentle squeeze, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. We sat in silence, the buzz of the cafe fading into the background as we held on to that fleeting moment of connection, both of us knowing that we were wading into dangerous waters. In the following weeks, our relationship developed a sort of rhythm. We'd meet up occasionally, sharing coffee, exchanging glances, talking for hours without addressing the underlying tension. We both understood that we couldn't go too far, that our friendship was at stake, yet we couldn't deny the gravitational pull between us. One Friday, as we were both heading back from a mutual friends gathering, we found ourselves alone in the elevator. The usual small talk died away, and a quiet intensity filled the small space. Emily glanced up at me, her expression unreadable, and I felt a surge of tension crackling in the air. "I don't think I can keep pretending," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Neither could I. Before I could stop myself, I reached for her, pulling her close, and we met in a kiss that was anything but gentle. It was as if all the restraint we'd shown over the past few weeks had finally snapped, and there was no turning back. Her hands slid up my chest, my own fingers tangling in her hair as we gave in to the moment we'd both been waiting for. When the elevator dinged to a stop on my floor, we quickly broke apart, both of us breathless and a little dazed. "We shouldn't," I started, but she cut me off with a soft laugh. "We've said that enough times, don't you think?" she replied, her eyes shining with mischief. "Maybe it's time we stop lying to ourselves." Over the next few months, we tried to find balance. Our secret meetups became more frequent, and with each one, the stakes grew higher. We'd spend time together, both reveling in the thrill and grappling with the guilt, yet unable to resist. But as the months wore on, the secrecy began to take its toll. The thrill had a price, and I could feel the weight of it settling on my shoulders. Then, one evening, as we were sitting on her couch, she turned to me with a serious expression. "Ryan, we need to talk about what this is," she said, her voice quiet. "We can't keep going on like this. Either we make a choice, or—" Her words hung heavy in the air, and I knew she was right. I cared for her more than I wanted to admit, and the thought of losing her was more painful than I'd expected. But the reality was, we couldn't keep living in a fantasy. There was too much at stake. "I know, Emily," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "Maybe we need to face the truth, even if it hurts." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Maybe it's time to say goodbye." We sat there, holding each other, letting the weight of our decisions settle over us. I knew that our time together had come at a cost, one that neither of us could ignore. But as I held her, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the end of something special, something we'd both treasure, even if it had to remain hidden. As dawn broke, I left her apartment for the last time, feeling a mixture of heartbreak and relief. We had both known it couldn't last forever, but in the end, we had shared something that would remain with us long after the final goodbye. As I walked away that morning, I convinced myself that it was over. I'd made my peace with letting Emily go, even though the emptiness lingered, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. But life has a way of throwing one final curveball just when you think the storm has passed. A few weeks later, while I was catching up with Nick over drinks, he leaned in, his eyes glinting with an unusual intensity. "Funny thing, Ryan," he said, swirling his glass. "I've been meaning to ask, have you noticed anything different with Emily?" The question caught me off guard. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my heart raced. "Different? No, not that I've noticed." He nodded, seemingly deep in thought. "Lately, she's been a bit distant, and I'm not the only one who's noticed it. A friend mentioned seeing her with someone who looked a lot like you." I froze, my mind racing. Nick's gaze was sharp, too knowing, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Look, Ryan," he continued, leaning back. "I'm not blind, and I'm not mad either. Actually, I figured something like this might happen. The chemistry was obvious from the beginning, and honestly, Emily and I were not in the best place. Haven't been for a while." The admission was a twist I hadn't seen coming, but Nick wasn't finished. "I was going to bring it up to her. I wanted to talk it out, see where things went, but I have a feeling she's already made her decision," he said, his voice trailing off. "And as for you, well, I hope you know what you're doing." He gave me a look that held a strange mix of understanding and resignation before raising his glass. To friendship, and to whatever the future holds. The conversation left me stunned, grappling with a cocktail of emotions I hadn't anticipated. Part of me felt guilty, yet another part was strangely relieved, even a bit emboldened by his calm acceptance. Nick had seen the truth, and while it didn't make our choices any less complicated, it gave me a clarity I hadn't expected. That night, I stared at my phone, Emily's name on the screen, the weight of all our choices settling over me. The twists and turns had brought us to a place neither of us could have foreseen, a place where maybe, just maybe, a new beginning was possible, if we were both willing to take that leap. With one final breath, I typed a message. "Emily, I think it's time we stop running. Let's face this, together."